The Bible. Is it hard to understand?
When it comes to reading the Bible, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that this is the Word of God.
The seals have been broken, and the truth is here.
And when we go throughout the scriptures, when we go throughout extra biblical records, we find that the language that God employed, that He used to create the heavens and the earth, was the Hebrew language.
Christ said, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But yet no one, no religious leader, no religious church out there anywhere can now identify the 12 tribes of Israel. Can we? God is quite simple, but it seems as if man makes understanding Him hard.
What are those mysteries?
The truth of your book and the truth will make you free. The Hebrew and Bible Academy, you're invited.
All right, Shalom family. We should be good now, and as far as the sound goes, we should be good now. So let's confirm if you all can hear as well as see. Okay, all is well? Okay, great. Great. All praise be to the Most High. First and foremost, I want to say Shabbat Shalom to you all who are alive with us on this broadcast, as well as those who will happen upon this in the future. This is Elder Lawyer filling in today for Elder Ricard. As you can all see, the topic of today's discussion is the GOCC Sabbath Q&A. So if there's any questions that you have, now is the time to ask. But before we get into that, I first and foremost want to remind you all that yes, we have just officially entered another Hebrew and Bible Academy, which started last Sunday. Last Sunday, we had a beautiful lesson dealing with the creation of the universe. This week, we're going to be touching on a topic titled Tracing the Serpent Seed, Showing the Origin of Darkness. So if you're interested in that lesson, in which we'll be breaking down where and when sin entered into the earth, how corruption and evil entered into a world, whereas initially, as we all seen in the breakdown of creation, those who were present, you all saw that everything was made in order. Everything was good. So the question is, if everything was created good, where did evil come from? Well, we're going to discuss that in tomorrow's lesson. Also, some of you may be wondering about certain teachings and certain practices that have been or become commonplace in today's world. Things such as astrology, witchcraft, sorcery, the use of certain weapons, certain technologies. You may be asking yourself, well, where did these things come from? Well, again, we discussed that in our breakdown, Tracing the Serpent Seed, showing how certain things were taught, certain practices were taught in the earth, which would negatively affect mankind. So all of that and more will be discussed in tomorrow's lesson. Also for the Hebrew, we're going to be covering our first Hebrew prayer. So for those who are interested in the Academy, getting not only the Bible breakdowns, but also the Hebrew, along with the information that will be covered in the news, what you can do is go to historytimes.org, and there you'll get all the information you need on how to participate in the Academy. All right. Okay, so at this time, you all can, if you have any questions, you can ask. All right. I ask you all to first and foremost, please excuse the tardiness. We are dealing with some bad weather here, so that resulted in some power outages and things of that nature, but everything is good now. I'm here before you, right? So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Someone says, what are the things you can and cannot do on the Sabbath? That is a very good question, and we will answer that according to Scripture, right? So the first thing we want to do before we touch on the do's and the don'ts, we first, if I can pull this up very quickly, we first want to deal with the initial introduction of the Sabbath, right? To give you the understanding as to why the Sabbath was created or was instituted. All right, so you should be able to see this now. All right, so we're going to start off in the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, right? And I like to go through this just in case somebody is watching this for the first time and may wonder why. Well, why are we talking about what should be done or what should not be done on the Sabbath? First and foremost, what is the Sabbath, and does the Sabbath apply, or the Sabbath regulations apply, based on the fact that Christ have come? According to some, Christ came and did away with the commandments. How does that now play into our time, understanding that, well, at least some have the understanding that the law is done away with? Okay. Should there even be a breakdown on what should and what should not be done on the Sabbath? Is the Sabbath still in play? Well, we're going to take it from beginning to ending, and hopefully this will answer your question for the person who asked it. Let me see who we have here. Who asked the question? Let's see here. All right. I think Pierre Hunt asked the question. All right. So Pierre, we're going to try our best to answer your question as much as we can, simply using the Bible. Okay. So we're going to start off in the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter, just showing when the Sabbath was instituted, why it was instituted, and why we specifically still till this day honor the Sabbath. So this is the book of Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. We actually covered this in week 1 of creation. It says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made." So we know that God created all things in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. Right? So the Sabbath day has its origin in the creation story. The Sabbath has its origin going back to the beginning of time, the beginning of all things. So it says here, "And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had made." So this is before the law of Moses was instituted. This is before there was any such thing as a person or a man by the name of Moses. Okay? Before Moses entered the scene with the 10 Commandments, there was already an institution, or at least an acknowledgement, of the 7th day being the day from which God rested from all his work. So, "And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had made, and rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God," not Moses, right? "But God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it," meaning he separated or set apart the Sabbath for his purpose. Okay? The question is, what was that special purpose? For what purpose did God decide to sever out the Sabbath to sanctify it? Well, again, we just read it. It tells us that on that day, God ended all his work which he had made. Right? Which he had made when? Throughout the course of the 6 days. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. So this is where the Sabbath is instituted, just in case we have people who have that question, who may be listening right now, or may happen upon this lesson or breakdown in the future. We don't get it necessarily, even though it was instituted and codified as a law during the time of Moses, when he received the Ten Commandments and was given to the Israelites. The concept of the seventh day being sanctified did not start with Moses. It began with the Most High. Okay? Someone says, does Sabbath or Shabbat mean Saturday in Hebrew? The answer is no. Okay? The answer is no. We'll break that down second. Since it's in relation to the Sabbath, we'll break that down separately. Does it mean Saturday? No. Does it fall on Saturday, the day that we, speaking the English language, in which the days of the week just so happen to be influenced from, I believe, the gods, I want to say Norse mythology, that's where many of the names come from. Does the Sabbath just so happen to fall on the day that we call Saturday? Okay, which is literally Saturn's day. Even though we don't acknowledge Saturn, that's just the name that it is labeled, or it has been given in our current time. And that's the day we call it. Now, it just so happens, again, reiterating, it just so happens that the day that we call the Sabbath falls on a Saturday. Does the word Sabbath itself mean Saturday? And the answer to that question is no. And I'll break that down. Okay? So moving on. Okay? Now we're dealing with the institution under Moses. And we're going to see what Moses specifically stated concerning the Sabbath. Exodus 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. So we're going to simply look up, to incorporate the question that someone had, we're going to look up the meaning of Sabbath. All right, let me pull up another Bible program that'll make it easier for us to look up this word. Let me pull up a separate Bible program. Okay, and this is going to help us easily look up the Hebrew word for Sabbath. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 20 and verse number 8. Again, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. All right, let me pull up. Let's see here. Let's pull up a Hebrew Bible. Okay, the BHS. Okay, and here's the word we're looking for. Okay, it says here Zakawar, remember, Oth being a direct verbal object, showing us what it is we should remember. What should we remember? Yawam, day, or the day. Ha-Shabbath, Sabbath, the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day. So let's click on this very quickly. The word Shabbat, I'm not sure if you can see that. Okay, not sure if you can see the pop-up. If not, I'll just read it. I'm not going to try to make sure. Okay, I'm not going to try to spend too much time making sure you can see it. I'll just read it. Okay, Shabbat or Sabbath. a day of rest. Okay. I want to get the actual definition of the word. Not necessarily an explanation of it, but the definition. So let me see if they can give me something that's going to simply give me, this is the vines. Okay, the Sabbath, the verbs. Now, this is what I'm looking for. The verb Shabbat is the root of Shabbat. 6 days you are to do your work, but on the seventh day you shall cease from labor. Okay? Sabbath rest. Right? So let me go back. Let me see if I can just I just want a basic definition of this word. Okay? This is from Mounce's Complete Expository Dictionary of the Old Testament, Old and New Testament. So it says Sabbath, the seventh day of the week in the Hebrew calendar, modern Saturday, with a focus of this day as the day of rest and worship, by extension, Sabbath, any day or year or period. So let me do this. Let me go to the blue letter because, again, I just want a simple breakdown of the word and its meaning. So let me go there very quickly. BLB, I'm just incorporating this. Someone asked, does Sabbath mean Saturday? The answer is no. But I want to make sure that you all can see this for yourself. Right? Exodus 20 and 8, we're in the blue letter. And let me pull this up so you can see it. All right, let me see here. All right, there we go. All right, so let me bring this over, enlarge it, so you all can see with me. And then I'm pretty sure the question will come up. How do we know that the Sabbath is actually Saturday? We're going to show you that as well. Okay? To be more specific, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. But how do we know that the Sabbath falls specifically on a Saturday? We're going to answer that as well. All right, so here we got the blue letter. All right, we're looking at the word Sabbath or Shabbat. Okay, so we want to go back and get the origin of this word. The word Shabbat means to cease. In fact, I'll go here to the KJV count. This word is contained 71 times in the KJV. In the Hebrew, 47 times is translated as cease. Okay, cease, a cessation. Rest is translated as rest 11 times. 3 times is translated as away. 2 times is translated as fail. 1 time is translated as celebrate, and 7 times is translated miscellaneously. Okay, but the word Sabbath means to cease or to rest. That's what Sabbath means. Okay, so again, to answer that question, Sabbath does not mean Saturday. However, the Sabbath does fall on the day that we have come to recognize as Saturday, which is the seventh day. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question for the person who asked it. Right, so now getting back to the actual regulations of the Sabbath, what can and what cannot be done? This is a question we get quite a bit. So I'm simply going through the Bible to show you what it specifically says pertaining to the Sabbath. Okay, so I'll just stick with this Bible. Going back to Exodus 20 and 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. Now this is key because this is one of the main regulations of the Sabbath. which is what? Not laboring or not working on the Sabbath. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. Okay? So the Sabbath became synonymous with a day of rest. Okay? A day of ceasing from your labor, ceasing from your work. Right? So that was one regulation that was kept on the Sabbath. Not laboring, not doing any servile work, not only you resting, but also allowing rest for your employees, your servants. Okay? Whether they were men servants or female servants. Right? Also, your cattle were supposed to rest on the Sabbath, to cease from work on the Sabbath. All right, moving on. Okay, some other regulations that were instituted on the Sabbath. Okay, and this is one that a lot of people go back and forth about. I'm going to go back to Exodus, I believe it's 16. This is one that people tend to go back and forth about. But this is where we stand when it comes to this particular law. Okay, Exodus 16. Let's see here. Exodus chapter 16. I'll start at verse number 14. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoar frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna, for they wist not what it was, meaning they knew not. That's what wist means. They knew not or wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man, according to the number of your persons. And take ye every man for them which are in his tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more, some less. So in other words, you gathered according to your need. Okay? And when they did mete it out with an omer, he gathered much. He that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. Jumping down, getting straight to the point, it says here, and Moses said, verse 19, and Moses said, let no man leave of it till the morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left of it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was wroth with them. So jumping down, what does this have to do with the Sabbath? We're going to jump down to verse number 22, where it says, and it came to pass that on the 6th day, which was the day of preparation, by preparation meaning the day in which you prepare for the Sabbath. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, so on the Sabbath, you were to gather twice as much manna. Someone says, what is an omer? An omer is an ancient Hebrew measurement. Okay? An ancient Hebrew measurement. All right, reading on. It says here, and he said, that is that which the Lord hath said, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Okay? So that Hebrew word in the book of Exodus, chapter 16, verse 22 is Shabbathon or Shabbaton or Shabbathawan. Okay, that's the word for rest, right? To show you that there's a correlation between the word rest, which in this case, Shabbathawan or Shabbaton, as some may pronounce it, and the word Sabbath, which is Shabbath. Sabbath is synonymous with rest. Just building upon what we established earlier, the fact that Sabbath and Saturday don't mean the same thing. However, they just so happen to fall on the same day. Okay? So it says here, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seethe that which ye shall seethe today, or what ye will seethe, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. All right, so we told him to bake and prepare all that you need on the sixth day. Right? And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink. Neither was there any worm therein. And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. Meaning there will not be any manna coming down from heaven on the Sabbath day. So make sure you take twice as much on the sixth day. 6 days shall ye gather it, but on the seventh day, this is verse 26, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the seventh day for to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for the Lord hath given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the sixth day the bread of 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place, and let no man go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. So many people look at this particular law. Why did I go here? Many people look at this law and they say, well, this shows that you're not supposed to prepare food on the Sabbath. Okay? And if that is something that is on your conscience to tell you that I should not prepare food on the Sabbath, don't prepare food on the Sabbath. Okay? If that's on your conscience. But when it comes to food preparation, one thing we have to understand is that in the ancient world, food preparation was not the process of simply what? Turning a knob on a stove. Okay? For those who use a microwave, popping something in a microwave and pushing buttons. That's not work. Okay? Or if you have an air fryer, popping something into the air fryer and pressing the button and the air fryer cooks the food. That's not work. That's not labor. Okay? What it took to prepare food in ancient times, many of you experienced this during the Feast of Tabernacles. You know that it is work to prep food as it was done in ancient times. Okay? It wasn't just turning a knob or pressing a button and ta-da. Okay? Your food is done. It was a much more strenuous, laborious process. Okay? So, now again, if it is on your conscience heavily that you should not prepare food on the Sabbath, then I'm not saying to you that you should now go ahead and prep food on the Sabbath. If it is against your conscience, don't do it. Okay? However, understand that what you do currently in this present day and time is not what they were doing to prepare a meal in their time. Okay? Let me give you an example of what they had to do to make sure that their food could be prepped. Let's go to the book of Numbers 15. All right, Numbers 15 and 32. Right, as Elder Dale stated, you press buttons. You did more work to log in to watch this lesson than you did or than you do in today's time to prep a meal. Okay? Today, the technology has progressed to a point where really all it takes is a press of a button or a turn of a knob in order for your food to be prepped. Okay? Right. Someone says they were telling their older that said that before. Exactly. Now, again, it's on some people's conscience not to do it. I'm not going to argue with someone who feel as though that they can't cook on the Sabbath. If that's what's on their conscience, I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. I'm not going to tell them to do otherwise. Okay? But here's the deal. Okay, Numbers 15 and 32 says, and while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath. Okay, now why was this man gathering sticks? Well, in order to deal with someone said what happened to, let me not focus on this right now. There's too much going on as I'm trying to answer the question. I'll get back to this when I'm finished answering this question. So let me get this out of here. All right. This is a distraction right now. All right. So why was he gathering sticks? Well, in ancient times, in order to prepare food, you had to first prepare a fire in order to get warmth. Like, for example, in today's time, if you want to get warm, all it takes is for you to walk to your thermostat, hit a switch, or press a button. Some of you have thermostats that are called smart thermostats, where you can open up your phone and turn on your thermostat from your phone. Right? That's modern technology to do what? Heat up your home. In ancient times, there was no such thing. You had to go, find a wood source, chop down that wood. All right. After you chop down the wood or the tree, you then now had to chop that log down to size. And once you chopped it down to size, then you had to split that wood to turn it into firewood. So it was a long, arduous process. Okay? Gathering sticks, getting things together in order to either heat up your home, heat up your tent, or prepare your food was a process. A process that we do not have to do in today's times. Not unless you're living off the grid, you're living in a tent, you're living in maybe a tiny home or something like that, and you don't have any appliances inside of it. So you still got to go through the process of chopping wood, gathering sticks, and doing all those things in order to heat your home or to prepare food. Unless you're in those cases, majority of times you're in a modern situation with the modern technology and the modern convenience that comes with that modern technology. Okay? So let me bring this back 1 second. All right. So this man was gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Why? Because you needed this for fuel in the ancient world. Okay. There was no electricity where you can just flip a switch and automatically in 30 seconds, a minute, 30 minutes, your food was done while you're sitting back chilling. Okay. That wasn't the case back then. Okay. So it says, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks upon the Sabbath. And they that found him gathering sticks brought him unto Moses and Aaron and unto all the congregation. And they put him in ward, meaning they put him in a prison, confinement, because it was not declared what should be done to him. And the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall be surely put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. And all the congregation brought him without the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died. And the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. Right? So this is one aspect of what it took to prepare food in the ancient time. Now, this is just dealing with the fuel source and the preparation of the fire, which itself is work. This is not even dealing with the process of preparing an animal, right? Because in ancient times, even though they had butcher shops, you have to keep in mind, they're in the wilderness at this time. Okay? Later on, you would have, things such as butcher shops and so on and so forth as Israel became, developed and established as a nation in their land. Right? But for the most part, in order to prepare your food, especially if you were preparing an animal, you had to do what? You had to kill the animal. You had to drain out the blood. You had to remove the skin. You had to chop that animal down into parts. Okay? Wash the animal, clean it, and then prepare it for a meal. Okay? So again, in the ancient world, it took work to prepare food. Okay? Let's think about this for a second. Let's go back to an example. Let's give a quick example. Okay, let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 27 and verse number 3. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver, and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat. So this is Isaac telling Esau to go and hunt venison, which is deer, to bring back that venison and prepare it as a meal so that Isaac could now bless Esau before he passed. Now we know obviously that didn't take place. We know that Esau went out and hunted the venison, right? However, Jacob beat him to the punch. But I'm simply using this as an example to show what it took in ancient times in order to provide and prep a meal. It wasn't some pre-cut pieces of chicken or pre-cut pieces of beef or pre-cut pieces of venison or pre-cut pieces of pigeon or pre-cut pieces of goat, right? You had to actually take live animal, okay, an animal from the livestock, or in this case, an animal from the wild, and prep that animal from start to finish. It took work. Now, you simply go, you open the refrigerator, you grab your pieces of chicken that have already been pre-cut. All the work has been done for you. The only thing you're doing is adding what? Salt, pepper, and whatever else you add to your chicken. Okay? Your beef products. You're opening your fridge and taking out a steak in which all the work has been done for you. The steak has already been cut off from the cow. It's already been butchered. Right? Pre-cut lunch meat. The work has already been done for you. Okay? Some people say, well, you're not supposed to kindle a flame. Well, you're not kindling a flame. You're turning a knob. Kindling a flame is actually doing what it takes, what many of you do during the Feast of Tabernacles, what many of you have done during the Feast of Tabernacles, which is taking sticks, rubbing them together, okay, trying to get the fire going. That's what kindling a fire is. Turning a knob on the stove is not kindling a fire. It's not preparing a fire. Kindling is the actual process, the ancient process that it took, whether you're using a stone, whether you're rubbing sticks together, Just that whole process that it took in order to what? Prepare fire. Okay? Someone says they prefer to cup their own chicken. If you prefer to cup your own chicken, hey, you like it, I love it. Okay? But it's much Salakia, less work than it took in ancient times to prepare a meal. Okay, so I'm using this as an example. So we're going to carry on. Okay, it says, now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver, and thy bow. He didn't say, take your salt, take your pepper, take your onion powder, take your curry powder, and just sprinkle it on some meat that's been already cut for you. That's not what Isaac said to Esau. Okay? Isaac said, do what? Get your weapons, your quiver, which is the carrying case for your arrows, and your bow, and go out to the field. Not go to the refrigerator, but go out to the field and take me some venison. Hunt me some deer. And make me savory meat, such as I love. And bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt for venison. You had to hunt for your food. Okay? Now, in this story, it's beautiful because we have two examples. We have the example of what it took to go out and hunt an animal, but we also have the example of what it took to simply go amongst your livestock and take an animal from your livestock and prep it. So now, for the sake of time, we're going to jump to that example of going to the livestock and taking an animal for preparation. Verse 6 says, and Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, bring me venison and make me savory meat, that I may eat and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, meaning the livestock, and fetch me from thence 2 kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. So let me jump down. Verse 14 says, and when he went and fetched and brought them to his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. So this is a live animal that had to be, prepped. Meaning what? The animal first had to be slaughtered. After it was slaughtered, the coat of that animal, the skin of that animal had to be cut off, which we're about to read. So you had to remove the skin, right? Then you had to drain out that blood. Why? Because the law required that we do not eat blood. So you have to let that blood drain out, right? So it says here, and Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. And she put the skins, which she had to remove manually from that goat. She took the skins of the kids of the goats, or it says she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, meaning upon Jacob's hands. Okay, to show you what? That they had to skin the animal. Right? It says, she put it upon Jacob's hands and upon the smooth of his neck, and she gave the savory meat and bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So not only did you have to prepare the meat, you had to prepare the bread. You had to go through the whole process of what it took to make bread. Okay, kneading it. Okay, letting it rise, go through its rising, kneading again, and whatever type of bread she was making. You know, going through that whole process, right? So there was a lot of work that went into prepping food, whether you hunted it from the wild or you went and got that animal from your livestock. Regardless of what situation it was, it took a lot of work. So this is something I would say that people at least consider when they put forth the idea that, well, cooking on the Sabbath is against the commandments. So you're not supposed to cook on the Sabbath. We have to remember that what it took to cook back then has been cut down to a minute science, a minute process in today's times. Okay, 99.9% of the work that actually had to go into cooking and prepping a meal in ancient times has been taken away. Your bread is prepackaged, right? Some of you make your own bread, but I'm pretty sure you're making that bread before the Sabbath comes in, right? The meat is already cut up and butchered for you, so a lot of that has been taken out the process. Now, if we are to go back into that time, when we are to go back into that time in which you have to go through all of those processes to prep meat, then obviously, and prep food in general, then obviously we're going to try to abstain from doing that on the Sabbath. Okay? But the process that process that we just read in the Bible, we're not doing that. Okay? We're turning knobs, pressing buttons. Voila, food is done. Okay? Now, again, if there's somebody whose conscience is disturbed at the idea of preparing food on the Sabbath, boiling rice, okay, baking some chicken, whatever the case may be, if your conscience is disturbed, I would say do not do it. Do not sin against your conscience. Right? I want to make that clear. All right. Moving on to the next point. Okay, some other things that were regulations on the Sabbath. This is taking so much longer than I wanted it to or expected it to, but I understand with topics like this, we have to try to cover a lot of ground. So we'll probably cover this and maybe two more questions and conclude. All right. Other regulations on the Sabbath. All right, we're going to go to the book of Nehemiah 13 and 15. Nehemiah 13 and 15. Nehemiah 13 and 15 says, "In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading donkeys, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens." So they were doing laborious work on the Sabbath, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also, which brought fish and all manner of ware, by ware meaning goods, all manner of goods, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus? And did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? So did not your forefathers do likewise? And because of it, did not the Most High punish us? So reading on, it says, verse 19, "And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath." This is why Christ says, "Pray that your flight be not on the winter, nor on the Sabbath day. Why? Because on the Sabbath day, the gates of the city were closed, which limited now your opportunity and ability to escape the city. And some of my servants set at the gates that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. Verse 20. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of good of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. Right? So what is this speaking about? This is speaking about Israelites along with Gentile nations, right? Doing both laborious work on the Sabbath day, okay, dealing with business as usual, and also trying to sell goods on the Sabbath. Okay, so what is this showing us? Also on the Sabbath, we could not deal with our normal business as usual business transactions. Okay? We could not deal with that on the Sabbath. Okay? The process of buying and selling, we did not do that on the Sabbath. Okay? So on the Sabbath, we abstain from what? Buying and selling, business transactions, dealing with business as usual. Okay? Let's get another example of this. This is the book of Amos, chapter 8 and verse number, I'm going to start at verse number 4. Hear this, O ye that swallow up the needy, even to make the poor of the land to fail, saying, When will the new moon be gone, meaning the new month, be gone, that we may sell corn? In other words, when will the holy day be over so that we can now go back to business as usual? To show you that normally on the holy days or on the Sabbaths, we did not deal with business as usual, business transactions. Okay? Merchandising and so on and so forth. We didn't deal with those things on the Sabbath. Okay? And the Sabbath that we may set, it says, saying, when will the new moon be gone that we may sell corn, to show you that usually they didn't do it on the Sabbath. However, it's showing the carnality of our people. Okay? In our people's minds, it got to a point where it's like, when will this be over? Instead of acknowledging the Most High's new months and his Sabbaths, the mindset was, when will this be done? When will this be over so that I can get back to business as usual? Okay? In the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great. Meaning making the ephah small, meaning making the product small, making the product go away, and making the shekel great. Okay? So, in other words, when it says making the ephah small, let me get rid of all the wheat, okay? All the heaps of corn, so that the money can roll in. Showing you the carnality of our people as it pertains to the Sabbath. This is the book of Amos, chapter 8, verse 4 through 5. Now, I'm going to come back to this because this actually relates to a scripture that many people refer to when it comes to Sabbath regulations. And they put a broad, they use this scripture, and I understand why. Okay, I understand why the scripture is used to bring everything under a broad spectrum of what can and cannot be done on the Sabbath. But in context, the scripture we're going to go to, which is Isaiah 58, is dealing with a specific act that was being done on the Sabbath. Okay, it's not necessarily covering, and again, I understand why people use it. Okay, but the scripture is dealing with a specific type of thing that was being done on the Sabbath. Okay, and we're going to explain that in a moment. And then we're going to go to Christ, right? So, moving on, someone says this means not leaving a home and going out to dinner as well. We'll get to that. We'll get to some of those things, okay? All right, so, because here's the thing as well, okay? There's some things, some regulations that people put on the Sabbath that are not necessarily restricted on the Sabbath. And that's the point I'm going to make in a few moments, okay? Right, Isaiah 58. You understand where I'm going, right? And again, that's a scripture that people use pretty much to cover a broad spectrum of things that should and should not be done on the Sabbath. But when we look at the context in which we're going to do, right, we're going to show you that it's dealing with a specific type of thing, right, that people were doing on the Sabbath, and it relates to what we're reading here in the book of Amos. So it says here, saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances of deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver, and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. The Lord have sworn by the excellency of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their works. Okay? So they were hoping for the Sabbath to be finished so that they can get back to business as usual. And not only was it simply business as usual, their business as usual, meaning their business transactions, according to the Bible, were corrupt. They were dealing with corrupt business practices. Okay? So again, this shows a few things. I'm going to come back to this in a moment because it relates to what we're about to show. But one thing it shows is that, of course, when reading this, it shows us that we normally did not sell on the Sabbath. That's why they're saying, when will the Sabbath be over that we may sell wheat and corn and buy servants and things of that nature? Why? Because we didn't do those things on the Sabbath. However, it also shows the mentality and the carnality of our people and some of the practices we were dealing with in this time period. Okay? So now that brings us to Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58 and verse number 3. And I'm going to start here because even though it starts with a fast, okay, it starts speaking about a fast, the same things that are implied concerning the fast and how we dealt with our fast is the same way we dealt with the Sabbath, right? Isaiah 58 in verse 3 says, wherefore, meaning why, have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure. So people look at that and it says pleasure, and automatically they put pleasure, they place a broad spectrum of various things under pleasure. Okay? What I'm going to show you is that this pleasure is speaking about something in specific. Okay? And that specific thing is in the next line. In the day of your fast, ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. What labors? Well, the same labors we just read in the book of Amos, the 8th chapter. When will the new moon be gone that we may sell corn? Okay, ye exact all your labors. And the Sabbath that we may set forth wheat. Ye exact all your labors. Making the ephah small and the shekel great. Ye exact all your labors. And falsifying the balances by deceit. Ye exact all your labors, that we may buy the poor for silver. Ye exact all your labors, and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell the refuse of the wheat. In other words, you exact all your labors. You continue on in the Sabbath, business as usual. And this is the pleasure that it is specifically speaking of in Isaiah 58. Okay? Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I've chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? So in other words, is the fast, okay? This is called the Olive Bible, okay? So the fast, right? And we know that the chief fast throughout the year was what? The Day of Atonement. The purpose of that day was not to simply deal with the outward showing of fasting, the outward showing of putting on sackcloth, the outward showing of sitting in a corner on a pile of dust, the outward showing of putting dust upon your head and disfiguring your face to look as if you're fasting and you're in mourning. That was not the purpose of the fast. Okay? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I've chosen? To loose the bands of wickedness and to undo heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out of thy house, when thou seest the naked? And it goes on and on. So jumping on, what does this have to do with the Sabbath? Well, you're going to find out that the same exact things we were doing in our fast, exacting our labors, which, going back here, making sure we're on the same page, when it says, behold, in the day of your fast, ye find pleasure, the pleasure it's talking about is what? Exacting all your labors. Okay? And we gave some examples of that in the book of Amos 8. Okay? So that same mindset was done on the Sabbath. So it says, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, okay, you're turning away your foot, meaning what? Doing your own thing. Okay, that's what it means, turning away your own foot. Your foot on the Sabbath wants to go and sell and exchange merchandise, okay, buy servants, sell corn, sell wheat. Okay, that's what your foot wants to do. But the Most High is saying to turn your foot away from the Sabbath, meaning don't go and exact your own labors on the Sabbath. Don't go and continue business as usual on the Sabbath. So if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure upon my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight. Now, again, it's this point here that people, they put the pleasure under a broad umbrella of various activities. And again, I understand why people do so. Okay? And if there are a broad spectrum of activities that you abstain from on the Sabbath, I would say continue to abstain from those things on the Sabbath, right? If it is on your conscience. But the issue comes in where now, when pleasure is not defined, when it's not clearly defined, and you start throwing things in there, all of a sudden it becomes a broad spectrum of things which are not necessarily or were not necessarily restricted on the Sabbath. Okay? Like there's no clear-cut defined scripture in the Bible that says keep the TV turned off on the Sabbath. Okay? There's nothing that says that. However, because of this scripture, people will throw in, well, turning off the TV, making sure no TV is on the Sabbath. Well, there's not really a defined law that says that you cannot do so. But again, this scripture, for many people, allows them to put it under that umbrella. Okay? Now, if you feel you shouldn't turn the TV on the Sabbath, that is your prerogative. Okay? But there's no clear-cut, defined law that says so. In this scripture, again, I get why people use it, but the pleasure that it's talking about specifically is business. Okay? Business. Okay? That's the pleasure it's specifically speaking of. So from doing thy pleasure on my holy day. How do we know this? Again, we go back to verse number, verse number 3. Right? Behold, in the day in the fast ye find pleasure and exact all your labors. Okay? Someone says, what about in Jubilees? Says, whatsoever you had not prepared to eat on the Sabbath. Again, the book of Jubilees. Who is the author, according to the record, who is the author of the book of Jubilees? According to the record of Jubilees, who is the author? Who is the author of Jubilees when you read the record of Jubilees? Just a quick question, and we don't have to block the sister who asked that question. Moses, right? Moses. Okay. In the time of Moses, okay, what process did it take to prep your food on any day, let alone the Sabbath? What was the process of prepping your food? Did they have microwave ovens and air fryers and ovens and all those things in the time of Moses? Or did they have to do like actual real work to prepare food in the time of Moses? They had to go through the whole gambit, okay? They had to go through the whole gambit in order to prepare food, okay? Now, here's another thing, right? Exactly. Exactly. There was a lot of labor in the time of Moses when it came to prepping food. So yes, in the time of Moses, you shouldn't eat anything that you did not prepare on the sixth day, because what? It took a lot of work to prepare what you prepared on the sixth day. Today, you're not doing that. Okay? It's not different on a double Sabbath. Whenever there's a double Sabbath, you treat that second Sabbath the same way you treat the weekly Sabbath. Okay? So yes, it was an arduous work to prepare food in the ancient world, a process that we're not dealing with today. Okay? All right, moving on. All right, moving on. So if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thine own ways. What are the own ways that it's talking about? Again, going back to verse number 3. Behold, in the day of your fast, because again, the same things they were doing on their fast or during the fast day, they were doing on the Sabbath, or trying to do on the Sabbath. Behold, in the day of your fast, ye find pleasure and exact all your labors. What labors? Again, going back to the book of Amos, the 8th chapter. Amos, the 8th chapter. Saying, when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn? That's the laborers talking about. And the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and falsifying the balances by deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes. So the pleasure is talking about is business transactions, labors. Okay? All right. The holy, going back here, says here, verse number 13, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. So now what is this talking about? Because again, when it comes to the pleasure, what happens because people are not defining specifically what that pleasure is, it opens up the gate for so many different things to be thrown in there that shouldn't be in there, because there's no specific regulation in the Bible against those things. The other example, the example I gave earlier, turning on the TV. Okay. Someone may say, well, taking a walk in the park, that's your pleasure. You can't do that on the Sabbath. Well, there's really no regulation in the Bible that says you can't take a walk in the park on the Sabbath. Okay. There's no regulation on that. Okay. But people throw it in there because it says thou shalt not do thy own pleasure. So we have to clearly define what that is. Okay. And then it goes on to say, not speaking thine own words. So what does that mean? Does that mean that you can, okay, I'm using my own words now. Does that mean that what I'm doing right now is against the Sabbath because I'm using my own words, my own vocabulary? What does that mean? Okay. So these things have to be defined so that we're not just throwing things in there. Like if you say, okay, if you ask your wife to get you a bottle of water from the fridge, that's you using your own words. Okay? You can't say that on the Sabbath. Okay? Not speaking your own words. You can't ask your son to make his bed on the Sabbath because that's using your own words. Okay? This is what happens if you don't clearly define what it's talking about. Okay? So, reading on, it says here, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, so on and so forth. Okay? So, right, don't be talking on the Sabbath. That's what it will lead to if you don't clearly define what it's talking about. Okay? And we understand that that's not what it's talking about. Okay? Yes, restaurants, in a perfect world, in an idyllic world, restaurants shouldn't be open on the Sabbath. However, we're in a time when you got brothers and sisters who have to work on the Sabbath for whatever reason. You got brothers and sisters who may work in a restaurant, and it just so happens that they have to work in that restaurant on the Sabbath. Okay? That's where grace comes in. Until their situation changes, they're in a situation in which they must do what they have to do to support their family. And we don't get into the process of telling people that you need to quit your job on the Sabbath. Why? If that's what they need to do to take care of themselves and their family, to keep a roof over their head, unless you're going to supplement that and make sure that they have what they need to keep a roof over their head, clothes on their backs and their children's backs, and food in their bellies, it's not up to you to tell somebody what they can or cannot do on the Sabbath as it pertains to work. Okay? So we don't get into that. All right? So moving on. All right. Now moving to the New Testament. All right, going to the book of Matthew, the 12th chapter. At that time, Yeshua went on the Sabbath day. Now, before I go here, okay, we want to make it clear that Christ did not come to do away with the Sabbath. Okay, Matthew 5:17. Think not that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, all right, going on and so forth. So we understand that Christ did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill. Okay? We know that Christ himself honored the Sabbath. St. Luke 4:14, Yeshua returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and there went out a fame of him through all the region round about. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. So it was his custom to go into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Okay? Someone says, so just study the word if you're not at Shabbat with the body. Yeah, you can study the word on the Sabbath. Okay? But again, we can't just put regulations on people and tell people you can't do this on the Sabbath, you can't do that on the Sabbath, when there's nothing clearly defined that tells them that they can't do this or can't do that. I want to make that clear. Okay? We can't put bonds on people that even the scriptures don't put on them, is what the point I'm making. Okay? All right, moving on. All right, we're in Matthew 12, and we are at, let's go back to Matthew 12, and we're at verse number 1. And Yeshua went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were an hungered, and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. Right? So the Pharisees came along and saw Christ and his disciples going through the field and plucking ears of corn to eat on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees said that you're breaking the Sabbath by doing such. Verse 3 says, But he said unto them, Have ye not read what David did when he was an hungered, and that they that were with him, how he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them which were with him, but only for the priest? Or have you not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priest in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Meaning what? In the temple every Sabbath, the priest did what? They offered sacrifices. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, on the Sabbath, the priests offered twice as many sacrifices as they did on the regular days of the week. So that same process we just discussed, going back to the book of Genesis 27, of taking an animal, skinning it, draining the blood, washing it, and prepping that animal for a sacrifice, all of that was done by the priest in the temple. Okay? On top of that, the other priestly duties that had to be fulfilled on the Sabbath. So Christ said that if you are to look at what the priest did on the Sabbath, they profaned the Sabbath every Sabbath by the works that were instituted by the priest or by the Most High for the priesthood on the Sabbath, yet they were blameless. Okay, so what is Christ showing? Christ is showing what? Even in the Old Testament, there was grace. Okay? Even as it pertained to the Sabbath. Okay, there was some level of grace. Specifically, someone who is working and doing the Most High's work on the Sabbath, right? As the priests were doing on the Sabbath, because they wasn't doing that work for their own pleasure or for themselves, that was instituted by the Most High. Okay? So in instances in which someone is working and laboring in the Most High's vineyard, there is liberty. Okay? There's liberty. So reading on, okay? And I'll give an example. This is a personal example. And I'm not saying anyone should follow this example. This is just simply an example of something that we did on the Sabbath when it came to being out there street preaching, right? There'll be days in which it is brick cold out on the street. Okay? There'll be days in which you would be up maybe the whole night before, and you get out there in the time of street preaching, or you're traveling to another city and you're out there street preaching. What happens? You get tired. Okay? You need refreshment. Okay? So there will be times on the Sabbath as we are preaching that obviously, according to the Bible, we didn't deal with transactions on the Sabbath. We didn't buy or sell. However, while we're laboring in the Lord's vineyard, okay, and we need refreshment, what do? There's a Dunkin' Donuts there. Go get some coffee. Go get some tea. Okay? So normally, under the Sabbath restriction, just going to the Dunkin' Donuts or getting your, whatever the case may be, normally you probably wouldn't do so. However, when you're laboring in the Lord's vineyard, there's liberty. Okay? There's an exercising of grace. Okay? So if someone asks, like someone asked earlier, should you go to a restaurant on the Sabbath? Under normal circumstances, probably not. Okay? However, when you're laboring and operating in the vineyard, there is liberty. Okay? If you're parched, if you need refreshment because you're out there standing for hours on end, either in the cold or in the heat, you need something to drink, go get some coffee, go get some tea, go get some water, go get some refreshments so that what? You can continue on with laboring, doing the Most High's work. Okay? So someone may see you in there in the coffee shop getting the coffee and say, hey, you breaking the Sabbath. Just like they were doing to Christ when he was getting corn out of the field. Not realizing that what? Christ and his apostles were laboring on the Sabbath. And therefore dealt with the liberty that they were given as laborers on the Sabbath. Okay? Now, am I saying this should be used as an excuse just to go out willy-nilly and do certain things on the Sabbath? No, that's not what I'm saying. This is simply an example of liberty. Okay? So, moving on, it says here, or have you not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. But if ye had not known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless. So Christ is saying that him and his apostles are guiltless in what they're doing. Why? Because they're exercising liberty on the Sabbath. To do what? To be able to further have energy to do the Most High's work on the Sabbath. Okay? So it says here, for the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. Now, people take this to the extreme and say, well, if Christ is the Lord of the Sabbath, then that means the Sabbath is done away with. That's not what it's saying. Okay? It didn't say Christ is the Lord of the first day or Christ is the Lord for Sunday. Okay? It says he's the Lord of the Sabbath. And because he's the Lord of the Sabbath, he knows exactly how to exercise liberty on the Sabbath. Okay? Not as an occasion to the flesh, but to serve his brothers and sisters. In fact, let me get that very quickly out of Peter. Very quickly. And hopefully I would have answered as much as I can on this topic. Okay? Here's the rule of thumb when it comes to exercising liberty, even on the Sabbath. Okay? 1 Peter's, I believe, 2:16. I'll start at verse number 15. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Okay, let me see if I can start up just a little bit more. In fact, I'll start there. That's fine. It says here, for so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free and not using your liberty for a cloak of maliciousness. Meaning you're not using your liberty to fulfill your own flesh. Okay? But as the servants of God. As servants of God, laboring in the vineyard of God, you have liberty. Okay? Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Okay? So what's an example of that liberty? We've seen an example with Christ and his apostles. Okay? In a normal circumstance, you probably wouldn't find yourself going through corn on the Sabbath. But in laboring in the Lord's vineyard, you're famished, you're hungry, and you need energy because you've been teaching and you're about to go do some more teaching. So what do? You replenish yourself. You use liberty to replenish yourself to go on and continue with the Lord's business. Okay? So that's an example of liberty on the Sabbath. Hopefully that answered the question as far as Sabbath regulations. I've spent way too much time on this, but I wanted to make sure that we covered as much as possible. All right. All right. Yes, Elder Recall says no fasting on the Sabbath. Normally, we would not fast on the Sabbath. Okay? The Sabbath was a day of rejoicing and resting. Normally, we would not do so. However, there are examples for special appointed fastings in which people did fast all the way throughout. Okay? Like when Christ fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he fasted all the way through. When Moses fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he went all the way through. 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? You had other fasts in scripture where a person would fast all the way through. Okay? Those were specially appointed fasts for specially appointed purposes. Now, if you need to fast beyond 7 days, which if you were to do so, we would advise that you really prepare yourself for that. But if you were planning to fast more than 7 days, okay, and you've dedicated yourself to doing so, then you have liberty to do what? Fast, even as the Sabbath comes in. Okay, that's between your fast and what you decide to do for how long is between you and the Most High. Okay, we're not coming in to your home, or you're not going to receive a phone call from us asking you why you're fasting through the Sabbath. Okay, that is an agreement you make between you and the Most High. But normally, our people would try to refrain from fasting on the Sabbath. We have one example in the book of Judith. Okay, let's go to the book of Judith very quickly. And then after that, we'll get to a few more questions. Okay, yes, don't start a fast on the Sabbath. Okay, but if you're already fasting and the Sabbath comes in, right, and you've appointed yourself to a 7-day fast, then by all means, fast all the way through. That's the agreement you made with the Most High. Okay, moving on. Let's get the book of Judith very quickly, just to show an example of our people abstaining from fasting on Sabbaths. One moment. All right, let me adjust this so we can see it. All right, we're going to the Apocrypha, and we're going to go to the book of Judith. All right, this is the book of Judith, chapter 8, verse number 6. Okay. Yes, you had the Daniel fast, where Daniel, he more so decided to abstain from certain foods. Okay, he decided to abstain from the king's portion that was appointed him. He decided to pretty much eat pulses and fruit and grain and water and things of that nature, which it was considered a fast. Okay. All right, where are we at? Judith 8, verse number 6, just showing an example of someone who did not fast on Sabbaths or feast days. Judith 8 and 6. And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save, meaning only not, the eves of the Sabbaths, meaning the preparation day, the 6th day, and the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, meaning the new months, and the new moons, and the feast and solemn days of the house of Israel. Again, and she, the she being Judith, fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbaths, and the Sabbaths, and the eves of the new moons, and the new moons and feast and solemn days of the house of Israel. Okay, so those were the days that she abstained from fasting. Now again, that was her decision. That's what she decided to do. Right? But now if you have made an agreement with the Most High to go on a 7-day fast or a 10-day fast, then you keep that fast according as you have agreed to. Okay? All right, I'll just take a few more before we close out. Someone says, is there evidence, precept, secular script, which proves that Lot and his daughters went through a portal to escape Sodom and Gomorrah? It's actually in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, it's actually in the scripture on the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. If we go to Genesis 19. Right, Genesis 19. Genesis 19 and 15 says, and when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters. So the men that is talking about, these are angels. Okay. While he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand. These are the angels. Okay. It tells us here in verse number 15, and when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, meaning they told Lot to hurry up, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, right, while Lot tarried, while he took his sweet time, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his two daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. Okay, so what is this saying? Lot and his family was not moving fast enough to escape the destruction. So the Most High had to have mercy upon Lot and his family. So how did the Most High exemplify his mercy upon Lot and his family? He allowed the angel to take them all by the hand and set them outside of the city. Now, when it says set them outside the city, they didn't gingerly walk out the city or run out the city. The angel took them and moved them out the city. Okay? Now, how do the angels travel in that fashion? When they're moving somebody from one place to the next, they move them through portals. Okay? Let me give you an example. Here's an example of someone else who was set outside of a city. Let's see here. Here's an example of someone else who was set outside of a city. By the angels, mind you. Okay, this is the story of Bel and the dragon. Okay, and the Apocrypha. Bel and the dragon. Let me pull it up so you can see it. Okay, so this is Bel and the Dragon, verse number 33. And it says, Now there was in Jewry, now keep in mind, if we go back to get some context, this story is surrounding Daniel when Daniel was in the land of Babylon. When they of Babylon heard that, they took great indignation and conspired against the king, saying, This king is become a Jew. Why? Because the king had a close relationship and a high level of respect for Daniel. So it says, the king is become a Jew, and they have destroyed Bel. He have slain the dragon and put the priest to death. So they came to the king and said, Deliver us, Daniel, or else we will destroy thee and thine house. So this is dealing with Daniel while in the land of Babylon, just to give you some context. Now there was in Jewry a prophet called Habakkuk. So now this is taking us back to the land of Israel, who had made pottage and had broken bread in a bowl, and was going into the field for to bring it to the reapers. So initially, he was making pottage, and he was making it specifically for those who were laboring in the field, those who were reaping the field, harvesting in the field. That's who he intended to make this for. 34 says, But the angel of the Lord said unto Habakkuk, Go, carry the dinner that thou hast into Babylon unto Daniel, who was in the lion's den. And Habakkuk said, Lord, I never saw Babylon, neither do I know where the den is. So Habakkuk has no clue. Okay, he said he never saw Babylon, and he has no clue where this lion's den is, in which Daniel has been cast. 36 says, Then the angel of the Lord took him by the crown, same way the angel in the book of Genesis 19 took Lot by the hand. Okay? The only difference this time is that instead of grabbing Habakkuk by the hand, he grabbed him by a lock of his hair. So it says he grabbed him by the hair of his head, and through the vehemency of his spirit set him in Babylon over the den. So the same way Habakkuk was set in the land of Babylon, directly over the lion's den where Daniel was, the angel in the book of Genesis, through the spirit of his vehemency, meaning through the power that the angels possess, spiritual, otherworldly power outside of this physical realm, that angel in the book of Genesis took Lot and his family and set them outside of the city. So it's the same exact thing, similar language, but it's more descriptive in the book of Bel and the dragon. 37 says, and Habakkuk cried, saying, O Daniel, Daniel, take the dinner which God have sent thee. And Daniel said, Thou hast remembered me, O God, neither hast thou forsaken them that seek thee and love thee. So Daniel arose and did eat, and the angel of the Lord set Habakkuk in his own place again immediately. Now, did he run Habakkuk from Jerusalem to Babylon and back to Jerusalem again? Okay, did they do a power walk from Jerusalem over to Babylon and then power walk back to Jerusalem again? No. Okay, the angels traveled through what? They traveled through portals. Okay, so they went through a portal into Babylon from Jerusalem, and from Babylon took another portal back into Jerusalem. Same thing happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. They were in the land of Sodom, went through a portal, and were set outside the city. Okay? Hopefully that answers your question. Right, as Elder Rock said, teleport. Okay? Teleport. All right, we'll take one more before we close out. Okay? Is it okay for us to use 5G internet or 5G phones? That's your prerogative. Okay, if you want to use a 5G phone or get 5G internet service, that's your prerogative. Okay? And that's not to say that there's not implications for using those things, but there's health implications on using in this current world, the way things are set up. There's health implications on using pretty much any and every technology that we have, especially our cell phone. Okay? But again, if you want to get 5G internet service or a 5G phone, that's your business. Okay. Can a woman divorce a man due to her being in an abusive relationship? Questions like that, we try to make sure we answer through counsel. I can give a general answer, but again, I want to make sure I give counsel personally on that, because what happens is now we have to kind of describe or get an understanding of what's meant by abusive. Okay. And we got to get both sides of the story. Just in general, if a woman is being physically abused, and I'm assuming that's the abuse you're talking about, usually we would advise her to get out of that situation. Okay. When we say get out of it, we mean get to a safe place until we're able to deal with some level of resolve. And if it's to the point where the person that she's dealing with is dangerous and doesn't want resolve, he just wants to harm the sister, then we would advise the sister to, deal with what you would normally deal with in the world when you're being pursued by somebody or assailed, which is what? Go to the authorities. Okay? But yeah, and Thawada El Iraq. Please, in the chat, in the chat. I know y'all trying to help, but sometimes I'll be looking in the chat when it comes to marital advice. Y'all be giving some terrible advice. Okay? So for the sake of not giving this sister any terrible advice, look, please, sister, go through the proper channels, send an email to gocccsouth@yahoo.com and get yourself some counsel. Okay? So that we can get the ins and outs of what's going on. Okay? Because I'll be seeing some terrible relationship advice popping up in this chat. Okay? So get some, because again, there's only so much insight we can give with one side of the story, and we would not want there to be too much information put out in somebody's personal life, someone's personal business in the chat to even try to get more insight on the story anyway. So that's something we would rather deal with privately, but just in general, without going too deep, if someone is in danger in a relationship, we would advise that you get out of that danger. And if the person only wants to continue to pursue you to do more harm and more danger, put you in more danger, then there's laws in place in the society to make sure that you are protected. Okay? Someone said the best thing is to pray. Look, sister, get some counsel. You want to pray. In fact, I'm not even going to go even any further. Sister, get some advice, okay? Through proper counsel in a private setting. Okay? Would we as Israelites be considered apostolic? It depends on what you mean by apostolic. Okay, if you mean by what was established by the apostles under Christ, what he left behind, yes, we would be in that degree considered apostolic. Okay, trying to establish as closely as possible the ministry and the offices that were left behind by Christ to his apostles. In that case, yes. But if you're talking about apostolic as a denomination of modern Christianity, that's something different. And in that regard, I would say no. Okay? Is it a sin to wear pants? No. Okay? If a woman is going to wear women's pants, that's not against the law. The law is against cross-dressing. Now, if a sister comes out dressed like Allen Iverson or what are some other celebrities out there? Some male celebrities. If a sister comes out trying to dress like Mike Tyson or somebody like that, then yes, that's the Bible is against that. That's cross-dressing. Okay? But if a sister is dressed as a woman and you know that she's a woman based on what she has on, the Bible is not dealing with that. Okay? There are pants made specifically for women. Yeah, a lot of these questions, I think we've answered these questions. These may be some new people, okay? But we've answered a lot of these questions in the past. Yes, a lot of the questions are on the website. So if you just go through the website, skim through, you'll get some of the answers. But in regards to that, okay, there are clothes made specifically for women, and there's clothes made specifically for men. Now, when it comes to a woman wearing certain things such as pants, modesty still has to be considered. Okay, there's pants made for women that no woman should be caught dead outside with. Okay, yoga pants, tights. I don't know how that became outdoor fashion, but things such as that should not be worn by a woman. Okay, especially on the outside of her house. But there are articles of clothing such as pants that are made for women, okay, that still exhibit some level of modesty. Okay? All right. How can you join the body in Philadelphia? Just send an email to gocccsouth@yahoo.com and I'll forward your information over to Bishop Amath. Okay. Can we cook for the food for the holy days and our special days, or keep fast on the Day of Atonement? Okay, on the Day of Atonement, we fast. On holy days, yes. Okay. We make sure that food is prepared for holy days. Okay. How do you get counsel if you don't have a body of believers? Just send an email to gocccsouth@yahoo.com. Okay. All right. With that, I know you guys still have questions, but we've been here for how long? It's going on 2 hours. So at this time, we're going to conclude with the Q&A. If you have any more questions, send them to gatheringas1@aol.com and we'll get to them as soon as possible. Also, be sure to go to our website, especially for those who are new. A lot of the questions that we're seeing here are questions that 9 times out of 10 are answered on the website. Also, we'll try to make sure we do more of these to incorporate more of your questions. Obviously, we can't answer everything in this time span. However, hopefully the questions we did answer did offer some level of insight on certain things that you may have had questions on. Okay? So with that, I want to say blessings, shalom, and may you all enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. Shalom.
The Bible. Is it hard to understand?
When it comes to reading the Bible, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that this is the Word of God.
The seals have been broken, and the truth is here.
And when we go throughout the scriptures, when we go throughout extra biblical records, we find that the language that God employed, that He used to create the heavens and the earth, was the Hebrew language.
Christ said, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But yet no one, no religious leader, no religious church out there anywhere can now identify the 12 tribes of Israel. Can we? God is quite simple, but it seems as if man makes understanding Him hard.
What are those mysteries?
The truth of your book and the truth will make you free. The Hebrew and Bible Academy, you're invited.